Hello everyone, and welcome to first Dasharo User Group meeting. I'm Piotr Król. I'm founder of 3MDev, the company behind Dasharo, and we are happy to welcome you to this meeting. And maybe let's start with our first section. What is meeting about? Like how the format would look like. So I don't know if you attended previous vPub meetings. Today there will be already sixth vPub, but we decided to make some additional, more structured mini conference meeting before vPub, which we called Dasharo User Group, and we dedicated it to our users, to users of Dasharo open source firmware distribution, and everyone who wants to learn more about open source firmware. And we want vPub to be more discussion between developers, between privacy enthusiasts, privacy conscious users, and people who develop privacy enhancing technologies. And in Dasharo User Group, we would like to show you a couple interesting things regarding roadmap, regarding Dasharo achievements in a given quarter. We want to make this meeting quarterly. So we're starting. More details you can find on vpub.dasharo.com. There is list of events. There are even some historical events there. You can find presentations and topics we discussed. This meeting is recorded. The vPub will not be recorded because it would be like casual talking and maybe less structured than Dasharo User Group. So what's the schedule of Dasharo User Group? So right now we have like short greetings and agenda. Then I will talk about Dasharo Roadmap, what kind of platforms we support, and what we plan in this year, maybe a little bit about the next year. Then Wessel Klein-Snackenborg, who is a founder and CEO of NovaCustom, will talk a little bit how open source firmware and NovaCustom hardware can revolutionize laptop experience. Then Tomek Żyjewski from 3MDev will talk about Dasharo Toolsuite, which is Yocto-based Linux dedicated to deploy, update, and do various other stuff with open source firmware, especially Dasharo. Then Michał Żygowski will talk about Dasharo Features, and maybe we'll dive a little bit more into details of the previously presented roadmap. And then we will present PC Engine's survey summary, which will explain next steps about support for PC Engine's open source firmware. So PC Engine is a Switzerland company who makes a network appliance, very popular among open source firmware enthusiasts, among OpenSense and pfSense users. So each block will take 15 minutes. After that, there will be 5 minutes to answer some questions. Our support will choose some questions from the chats just to avoid looking for the questions by the presenter. So maybe let's ask ourselves why we are here, why Dasharo, why even bother. So I have short story for you. Here is Bob, and Bob, like every day, looking at news and see these weird, scary articles in tech news, and is concerned to some extent about Spectre meltdown, UEFI vulnerabilities, firmware low-level stuff, and thinking like there is a lot of problem about that lately, and I wonder if this affects my computer. And then starting to research and think about how I can mitigate that, how I can make sure that my BIOS is not affected, how I can make sure that BIOS vendor for my hardware, for my favorite hardware is prepared for that and will deliver updates on time. How I can make sure that my firmware and whatever my computing works on is trustworthy. And do this research and find a lot about open source firmware, about core boot, maybe LibreBoot, maybe Linux boot, maybe various other projects like Heads. And and think like maybe this will help me to some of these problems, some of these concerns that I have. So he calls his favorite computing device shop and asking about open source firmware. In most cases, except some wonderful cases where this story ends differently. In most cases, it will be, what is this open source firmware? Like, I'm not sure if they support that. I'm not sure what is this. And after like multiple calls like that, this computing device shop manager, owner, starting to think, maybe there is something to this open source firmware after all, and maybe it is worth to ask my silicon vendor or maybe my provider of my ODM about if they can provide this to me. So they call silicon vendor. In most silicon vendors, in this case, will say, yes, we know about that, but we have recommended list of our partners. Those are independent BIOS vendors. This is fixed list of BIOS vendors. And this shop owner going to those BIOS vendors asking, and most typically get the same answer. I'm sorry, but this is against our business model. I'm sorry, we don't support that. I'm sorry, we have our own product, which is closed source, licensed, and we would like you to use that one. So what we would like to change, how we would see the world. So we would like to see the world in that way. So we have the same Bob looking at the same news, thinking about the similar solution, but when calling to his favorite computing device shop, he get answer, yeah, I have this list of compatible open source firmware distribution. Which one you want to have? And then Bob can pick and choose, and align to his threat model, and probably satisfy some problems and mitigate some problems that he thinks he have. Yeah, so that's about the vision, how we want to change ecosystem for the users. And let's say maybe a little bit about the community and how community evolved over last I would say like almost 3 years, but we did it in various with various activity, depending on the margins, depending on the community interest. To be honest, we accelerated recently, but it started like around 2020 when we created GitHub in November. Then we started some vPubs. Then we started Matrix channel, which gathered quite a lot of interest. We have over 100 members there already. And around April 2022, we released first 0.1 version, which supported modern Intel Alder Lake MSI Z690 mainboard. And that was like kind of small boom because everyone was happy to get modern hardware. So yeah. And right now we have first Dasharo User Group. It's 16th March. Maybe a little bit about GitHub. On the left side, you see statistics for GitHub, like 360 issues reported, 125 fixed. We merged to our core boot fork 318 pull requests. We had like over 1,500 comments, over 50 contributors to these comments. I'm saying about everyone externally from 3MDEP and Dasharo team. And to UEFI fork, the EDK2 fork that we maintain, we had 46 pull requests. So we would like to thank Thierry Laurion from Insurgo, Wessel from NovaCustom, Zilblazer, Moriel5, Firminator, and René Hoy, who contributed the most to the GitHub issues and to the GitHub pull requests. About the Matrix, Matrix is very active. Over that time, we had over 20,000 messages. It's about 50 messages a day. There was 104 people there, but I saw already today a lot joined, so there's probably more. Most active supporters on Matrix, except 3MDEP team, are Zilblazer, Collector, YHN, Technophil, Demi, Creative Nothing, and Silis. I would like to thank every user who contributed, every developer who contributed to Dasharo, And I hope this will make Dasharo open source firmware distribution even better. And I plan to report this information to you during the next Dasharo User Group meetings. About matrix space, which is our main point of discussion, there are 20 channels. Not everyone knows that there are 20 channels there. The most actives are Dasharo General. There is a connected channel, official channel, ERC channel of CubesOS, which is bridged to Matrix. There is Dasharo support, where you can look for support for your Dasharo deployments. There is Dasharo developers vPub, which most of you should be in this channel to have discussion today after the Dasharo user group. And there is also our famous Strange Boot project connected, which is DRTM, open source DRTM implementation, which we're trying to integrate in mainline Linux kernel, and which we will use in CubesOS anti-VMate implementation. Some interesting facts. There is Dasharo IRC channel bridget if someone wants to use that. There are some friendly projects channels like FiatKD firmware editor, a project made by Daniel Maslowski for looking inside the binary. There is a trustworthy platform module channel, TWPM, project sponsored by NLNet to create open source hardware TPM. Fobnail is our attestation token, attestation server on a token. Also other projects sponsored by NLNet. FWPD for BSD, we have also that channel, although it is not longer very active because most of the stuff was upstreamed. And there is very inactive channel Core EC, where we try to create our own or with partner with others open source version of embedded controller firmware. And that's it for this section. Do we have any questions? Okay. Yeah, so I guess we can slowly switch to the next one. So I will try to speed up. Okay, so this is Dasharo Roadmap. It's I believe like most of you should look at slides and then maybe read some of that stuff. So first thing about this Dasharo Roadmap is Dasharo community support roadmap, where we try to present what we plan to do for community. Of course, this is very long, and this is for a long period, very long plans. Many things can change, so there is no guarantees related to that roadmap. Yeah. So what kind of support levels Dasharo provide? So essentially, Dasharo provide 3 levels of support. First is Dasharo community support, which is kind of, we're doing that from margins, from donations, from various, like if we get grant from NLNet, for example, we're doing this Dasharo community support using those resources. It also contains support for people that contributing to Dasharo. So others like externally to 3MDEP also build that program. So second program is Dasharo support package, and this is program regular business like commercial offer for our business partners, and we do annual contracts like based on that. And this is typical firmware maintenance, keeping up close to upstream, making releases, doing new integration, bug fixes, and so on. And there is also Dasharo enterprise package, which is custom service level agreement dedicated to big corporations and relying on aligning open and proprietary roadmap and providing advisory for big corporation to do that. So the process for Dasharo community support, because like we see some people coming to us and asking, can I enable this platform in Dasharo? Can I enable that platform in Dasharo? So we have process for that. This process consists of, we can say, 4 main steps and then release. First step is discovery, which consists of some hardware proposition from users or from us. Then we're doing some analysis of the alternative options for that hardware. We look at the value analysis for like what value this hardware will bring to community, will bring to Dasharo, how it will evolve Dasharo, and what kind of community interest is there, and if, for example, we can hope for future donation or future interest and long-term maintenance of that hardware. Then we do evaluation, which typically start with BIOS backup, vendor BIOS backup, if this is platform that coming off the shelf. Then we're trying to create some recovery method for a given mainboard, just to have a stable development environment. We put together hardware compatibility list report, which is kind of dump all possible logs, so we have all details about the hardware for the porting purposes. And we agree on some static hardware configuration, what kind of processor, what kind of memory, maybe what kind of GPU, and we trying to build the same builds across people, so they can use the same thing during the porting and not some variety which can cause additional problems. Then we have porting phase, when we create something like a building manual, which you can find in Dasharo Universe documentation. Initial deployment, what you have to do if you buy new mainboard, how you need to prepare it for initial deployment of Dasharo. Test matrix is we can say test case definition or test scope, which you can also find in our documentation. And then there is the detailed documentation about various features enabling and so on. Then there is validation stage. After porting, after having some binary working, some release candidate that we can flash on mainboard and boot, we're creating hardware compatibility list, because we can switch processors, we can switch memory, we can switch GPU to check if those work. Of course, this is limited to what we have and to what community already have and can test. There is transparent validation, so this is a process of automatically validating the hardware and providing results to the community. Of course, we updating test matrix in this case, maybe we extending, we shrinking this test matrix. And there is also something like Dasharo certification program, which we kind of apply to hold this process to build binary that can be shipped to community. And there are two ways to ship binaries to community. There are public releases, which we call community releases. And this is for everyone, like those are publicly available binaries. Source code is always public. And this is like something that everyone can get. And there are also supporter releases. The plan for community releases is like to have like one a year or something like that, maybe with some hotfixes. But supporter releases are for those who paying donation, those who bought Dasharo supporter entrance subscription. Those releases should be more frequent and will be delivered for active supporters. Okay, about the roadmaps. So first roadmap is about emulation path. So we plan to enable Dasharo based on the OVFM UEFI package. We extend this package with Dasharo system features, with some UEFI secure boots improvements which we have. And we also enable UEFI payload package features, which are not yet enabled in OVFM. We plan to finish porting in Q1. In Q2, we will start validation. Our target is Ubuntu LTS. We hope to enable open source firmware validation scripts, which we have public on Dasharo GitHub. So we can automatically validate this QEMU. And then in Q3, we hope we will release. Unfortunately, we base on quite old version of EDK2, but we're working on improving that. And I hope in the next Dasharo User Group, I will tell you that, yes, we fixed that. Why we're doing that? Because we want to create Dasharo Developers Guide, which will give ability to move forward development of Dasharo just by using emulation, not having real hardware. In case of desktops, we have 3 vendors that we support or plan to support. So Dell with first platform is OptiPlex 7010. It's quite old platform, but we like it very much. It's reasonably cheap and still you can squeeze some performance from it. The point of it is it's to finally release that, because we have this code for some time. It would be in Q2. There will be core boot 4.17 used for that. IPXE 2022-01 and our old EDK2 fork that we have in Dasharo. The target operating system, at least from my perspective right now, is XCP-ng 8.2 long-term stable, because we plan to use this as a XCP-ng platform and maybe experiment with some XCP-ng features, maybe improve platform for that, and so on. The second platform will be NAS target, network attached storage target, Precision T1650, where we plan to port Dasharo system features, some secure boot improvements. The important thing is that the target OS is TrueNAS Core 13 for that platform. Of course, we will have ECC support for that, so we will have to validate that. And the target core boot version is 4.19. MSI. So I believe many of you heard about kubesOS certification of MSI platform and heard about our releases of MSI Z690A. So in quarter first, we had a release where we support kubesOS 4.1.2, and there is also early DMI protection for that. We expanded GPU hardware compatibility list for that. We enabled SATA hot plug, and there were many more fixes which you can read about on our blog. Then we plan to start validation phase of version 1.1.2 in next quarter. The support will be Raptor Lake S CPU. We hope to enable Flash BIOS, which is like a recovery, proprietary recovery method for these boards. We hope to have support for that, and we also would like to support Windows 11 software and drivers from MSI. The release is planned in Q3, and it will most likely be based on core boot 4.18. Then this would be supporters release, and the community release will follow in Q4. The other platform that we plan to support, which we're waiting for NLNet grant application approval right now, is Z790P, and we just sent grant. We're waiting for the approval, and the schedule will be that porting will start in Q3, then validation Q4, and then release in Q1. Or although it is possible that we will squeeze that and it would be way faster, depending on our busyness and on our workload. Then there is some plan on supporting Asus Pro WSX570As, and this is project driven by Han Etzer on Dasharo Matrix community. This will be potentially first platform which we will support AMD AM4 socket. And we will see how this will go. Right now, we aiming to get stable serial port support to be able to even realize if this is feasible. In case of workstations, some of you are definitely interested in KGP D16. We see that in number of searches of this term and how many people ask that on Matrix and on GitHub. We plan in Q2 look at all the community reported bugs, scope those, and see what we can fix. And we would like to prepare Debian 11 and Ubuntu LTS validation. And hopefully Q3 we will release core boot based on 4.14 with CBIOS 1.14. And yeah, so that's the target. In case of Power 9 support, Raptor Computing System Talos 2. We right now validating very actively. We're checking TPM compatibility. We're trying to enable heads and check all the features in heads. I'm not sure if we'll be able to finish that by end of Q2, but who knows? Like we're trying to do that. But our target right now is to have release in Q3. Which will be based on core boot 4.17 and ski boot 6.3. In case of a server line, it would be X11 SSH-TF, which is not very actively maintained right now in core boot. So we plan to add some features from us and improve this mainboard, this server mainboard. So we think the porting will take even to the end of Q2. And then we plan to extend support for server platforms, BMC-based server platforms in our validation lab. And the target operating systems will be XCP and GLTS and Debian 11. And this release will probably happen in Q4. Okay, so just final note. Okay, you maybe see that this roadmap is very, very long. Like, it's even up to the Q1 2024. You can help us speed up things. It's quite easy. You're going to our shop and you're just buying the Dasharo supporters entrance and just like telling us what kind of platform you would like to support with that, and we will subscribe you, and you will have early access to all the stuff we're doing. You can also influence the roadmap through direct communication with us. You can help also through contributing source code, contributing documentation, contributing test results, improving tools. Just join on GitHub and help us improve the ecosystem. You can help us by spreading the word about Dasharo and our mission on social media. It's also always very helpful to have a bigger reach and bigger audience which listen what we want to do. You can donate money or cryptocurrencies. How to do that you can find on docs.dasharo.com ways you can help us, or you can just contact us if you see other ways of supporting us or working with us. Just send us email contact@dasharo.com, and we would be glad to talk with you. Okay, any questions? Yeah. So that's not that's question that we're getting a lot. So that's discussion in the discovery phase. If you have proposal of such hardware, come to Matrix and just let us know what kind of hardware you think of. If we would know volumes of every possible ODM, then we could think about, okay, this platform seems to be very good, seems to have very high volumes, and there will be good community around it. And yeah, in that case, yes, we would be glad to support that. But it's a very, very generic question: how to find cheap, high volume, good platform that will work for community. Mhm. Yes, so that's essentially the problem. It's not exactly clear how to deploy things. So Dasharo got certain quality standards about the documentation, and that's definitely one thing that we plan to deliver. The other thing is Dasharo system features, which are some security features and some detailed feature which Michał Żygowski, Michik, will talk about in his presentation. We have some UEFI secure boot improvements which would like to introduce there, and various other stuff like IPMI, serial over LAN support, IKVM keyboard support, and this kind of stuff. I don't think we will do like tremendous amount of coding here, but it still takes time. It's not like we will sit 6 months here or 3 months and code all the time. We will just do that in our free time. But it will take time. Then when we will have some code base, we will have to validate that, and that's also taking time, setting up that in the lab and running all the tests we have, and that's it. Like there is not much innovation here, but we just want to have modern binary with good documentation and easy adoption.
Okay, we've got one more question. For crowdfunding, can you give us an estimate on porting a new motherboard, X6090 or AM45? I know it depends, but if it's possible.
No, it's very hard to say. We would have to talk about this directly. Like it's definitely not 15,000 euro. It's like it's bigger.
3 minutes break, and Vessel will have his presentation.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the word. So I'm Wessel Kleesnakenboog, founder of NovaCustom, a custom laptop brand in the Netherlands. And today I want to show you how to revolutionize your laptop experience with NovaCustom's hardware device and open source firmware. So I will talk about why NovaCustom is switching to the Dasharo firmware. I will tell something about the firmware update procedure. I will also give a status update on CubesOS certification that we are planning for a few models that we offer. Then we had some firmware problems, which I would like to discuss in context with the GitHub community. Then I will tell something about the new feature plans, and at the last slide I will talk about or I would actually like to get feedback from all of you, and maybe we can have some ideas of what we can improve. So why is NovaCustom switching to Dasharo? Essentially just because we really think it's better firmware. We are normally using the inside firmware. This is the firmware that is shipped with our laptops by default. But we started to offer some of our laptops with the Dasharo firmware already. So at the inside firmware, we have some security concerns, as it's all closed source firmware, and hence we do not know what the firmware is exactly doing. The Dasharo aims to be as open as possible, which is really appreciated by our customers. Dasharo is also basing its firmware on core boot, which has the benefit of faster boot times. So we want to sell our laptops with a better support for certain GNU Linux operating systems, especially Ubuntu, Fedora, and some others. Yeah, there is a problem with the inside firmware where the keyboard elimination is depending on software, and we would rather like to have the keyboard elimination of our laptops to be controlled by the firmware itself, so that it is supported for all operating systems, and so that it does not depend on any software. Another benefit of the Dasharo firmware is that it's updatable, which is quite important if there's any security concern in the current release. And in the past, we've had some problems with the fan curve for the inside firmware. Dasharo has optimized the fan curve so that we do not have complaints of customers any longer that have a fan that is being too loud. Dasharo also has IPXE integrated, which is great for our internal processes. We can automate the deployment of the operating system, which is really cool. And by the way, iPixie is really good documented. So yeah, that's really great. In fact, for the Dasharo firmware, there are endless of possibilities, and some features that we are thinking of to integrate in some new releases is a BIOS password, and we are also working on the Intel ME HEP disabling method for some of our laptops. We hope to be able to fully switch to the Dasharo by the end of 2024. We hope it's financially feasible, and this is actually also why our firmware transition is going so slow, because it costs a lot of time and fast money to get our devices ported to Dasharo. So to make this financially more feasible, we are considering to skip every second generation. Then I would like to tell something about the firmware update procedure of our laptops. We are currently using the Dasharo tool suite, which is an integrated boot option. And we so basically you boot the laptop to this boot option, then select firmware update option, which is option 5, and then the laptop should update its firmware. So that is quite an easy procedure. Before we used FWUPD for firmware updates, which could be done within the operating system, which is maybe even nicer. But this was problematic after switching to open source EC firmware. So the embedded controller firmware is not stored in the main SPI flash, and this makes it harder to fully update the firmware binaries. So we are now considering to switch that EC firmware from the EC chip to the main SPI flash, so that FWUPD can be used again. Then an update about CubesOS certification, which we announced in September 2022. So unfortunately, we had to postpone this, and this will most likely be postponed in April 2023. But I think FreeMDep can give a better estimation, as they are working on the validation and as we speak. The main reason why it has been postponed is that CubesOS does not support modern standby S0iX at this moment. Instead, they only support S3 suspend mode, and our laptops do have the possibility to get in S3 suspend mode, but the firmware has to be adapted for this. So the NV41 series with Alder Lake processor has been successfully tested with S3 suspend mode, but this was only in Linux, and we are also selling quite a lot of laptops with Windows or at like dual boot, and this is problematic. So we had to add a BIOS option to let the user switch between S0iX modern standby and S3 suspend mode, so that CubesOS can be would be able to get into this S3 state. So this was all successful, and this in test phase now, I believe. There are two other laptops that we wanted to have certification for, which is the NS51 series and the NS70 series with Alder Lake processor. But it seems that these laptops have, they share the same mainboard, and it seems that there is a transistor missing compared to the original mainboard. So now the firmware developers team is investigating the possibility to add this transistor, and maybe we can get S3 suspend mode fixed for these laptop series. Yeah, let's hope that, but this is not likely to happen in a few weeks or so for this series. Yeah, the last thing I wanted to mention is that S0iX is the future, if we like it or not, as Intel is phasing out support for S3. Then we have had some firmware problems, and actually these problems all have been either reported by our community, or our community has helped with information, and this way we could fix problems of firmware together, which is really nice. And this is also why I would like to say to everyone, please be active and let's solve firmware problems together, because if we work together and if we report a lot, then of course firmware problems can really be solved. If something is a problem but is not reported, obviously it can never be solved. This is of course the link to the Dasharo issues page of GitHub. So our new feature plans are as follows. In this year, we are focusing on the 12th generation Alder Lake models that we are currently offering. We are working on the stability, as we have two stability issues that were mentioned in the previous slide. And we are adding some new cool features. Yeah, so we are probably skipping the 13th generation Intel Raptor Lake, because it is just financially unfeasible to develop the Dasharo firmware for every generation. And next year we are focusing on the 14th generation Intel Meteor Lake, and we hope to be able to offer our laptops with this processor series for all the laptops that we offer. Yeah, so I would like to ask you guys, what is the firmware feature that you want? So I think this is the time for the discussions. Yeah.
Demi is saying that Cubes is working on S0iX, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, we've got one comment about RGB and keyboards.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at all my poor devs with their RGB NovaCustom keyboards, they are unable to change. Yeah, and we've got two questions. Do you plan a laptop with AMD CPU?
Yeah, so let me first comment on the RGB keyboard that cannot be changed. I was wondering if that is with the after the EC transition. So if it's with OpenEC.
Yeah, I guess Dennis mentioned probably the inside, the older version. I don't know, Dennis. Can you tell us did you mean the older ones, or did you mean the new one?
I'm not entirely sure, but I could check and give you the exact serial number if you want.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, then I will post the serial number in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. Okay. Sorry. Can you remind me of the second question? Oh yeah, with AMD processors. Yeah, we are actually quite depending on one manufacturer as we speak, but we are investigating also other ways to get laptops with AMD processor, and we know that this would be there would probably really a market for that. It's just It's just that we do not have the right hardware for that at this moment. But maybe in the future, we do not have any plans yet for this, but we do not exclude it either.
Okay, we've got second question. Why do you charge money for custom boot logo?
This is because it is a service. So when we are selling our laptop and we have to implement our own boot logo of the customer, we have to get this done, and to do so it costs time, and therefore it costs a bit of money. And of course, every customer can change the boot logo by themselves if they do not want to pay for this.
Okay, we've got one more question. Isn't S0ix already working on System 76 laptops with core boot? And we've got
our laptops currently use S0ix. We are working on S3 support as an option, just to get a certain operating system such as CubeOS compatible with our laptops.
Okay, and we've got serial number on our chat.
Okay, yeah, I think maybe I don't know if it's handy to check this like right now. So maybe if Dennis is still there at the vPub, we can talk about it then.
Of course, there's no rush.
Yeah.
So now it's time for a 1 minute break, and then Tomasz will start his presentation. Your life.
Okay, hello. So my name is Tomasz Rzeski, and I, with some colleagues, are responsible for the development of a system that some of you may have already encountered, and it is called Dasharo Toolsuite. This presentation is meant to introduce the system and provide some info about plans for the future. So let's start with the agenda. First, we will answer 3 brief questions, which are so what, how, and why in the context of the Dasharo Toolsuite. Following that, we will provide a brief introduction to the system's 3 main functionalities that are currently available. So, and then we will demonstrate them during the demo. Lastly, we'll conclude the presentation with a description of the upcoming releases and some ideas for future developments. So yeah, first let's talk about what the Dasharo Toolsuite is. And for simplicity's sake, we'll refer to it as DTS. So the DTS is a set of tools and scripts that operate in a minimal Linux environment. We could say that the goal of creating DTS was to provide a Swiss Army knife for Dasharo users and the open source firmware community, so similar to what BusyBox is just for Linux-based embedded systems. Currently, the focus is on providing verified methods for flashing firmware, as well as ways to report the details of the platform and the firmware that is on that platforms. The first version was released on August 9th, 2022, and we have since released 4 additional versions. As for now, we do not have a stable release cycle for the DTS, but we work on that. Also, we have established basic tests for DTS, which we have conducted on several MSI boards and NovaCustom laptops. However, we are considering transitioning to QEMU for testing, as approximately 90% of DTS functionality can be tested using QEMU. Also on the slides, you can see 3 links that goes to the documentation of DTS, the release pages, and the description of test cases. So now let's talk about how we created DTS. So we decided to use the Yocto project as our build system because we have significant experience in using it. Currently, DTS is compatible with the latest Yocto LTS release, which is called Kirkstone. To build it, we use an additional tool called CAS, which helps set up the environment, the build environment, and control the layers required for building. We also provide a list of steps in the documentation that must be followed to run the build locally, and I just encourage everyone to try it out and try to build DTS yourselves. The repository that stores significant build configuration and the Yocto metadata is called the meta DTS. The meta prefix is used to comply with designed Yocto guidelines. So yeah, that is it. And well, ultimately, we want to maintain 2 primary branches, which will be main and develop. However, right now, there is still some additional branches that we need to tidy, and we need to work on those branches to get everything clean. Yes, and regarding the build artifacts, each release is posted on the DTS release page, which link to that page was provided on the previous slide. Additionally, DTS can be boot using iPXE. We host 2 addresses, which are boot.3mdeb.com and also boot.dasharo.com. And just our goal here is to migrate this to the latter. For those who are currently using the Dasharo firmware, you should be able to run DTS from the network using just correct boot menu, as Vessel pointed that in his presentation. But also, if you have access to the iPXE shell, you just can use proper commands to boot DTS. So yeah, now we can talk about why we create DTS. So I may be mistaken, as it was quite some time ago, but the idea for creating DTS arose from a situation described just in this short comic. So let's imagine Tom, of course, who accidentally shares my name, and who recently discovered Dasharo. He navigates to the docs.dasharo.com and just carefully follows the well-prepared documentation. Well, at least we always like to think that it is well-prepared, always. And then flash his platform and bang, his platform is built from now. So probably he just made one small mistakes. So maybe some typo in one of the commands or something like that. And this may cause some significant danger to his platform, like it can be not able to boot again. So naturally, we just want to avoid such problems because there's something worse than just providing an open source solution that don't work, or even worse, just break something. So basically, this was the first input to create DTS. So to reduce risk that that community that want to try Dasharo, just reduce that risk that someone could break his platform. And yes, this was just the beginnings, because our ultimate goal is just to provide a tool that the open source community can use to make open source firmware more accessible. Yes, so now let's discuss some of the most important features of DTS. Firstly, we have the Dasharo zero-touch initial deployment, which enables users to run DTS on a device with the vendor BIOS and just perform the Dasharo installation following the procedure that is outlined in our documentation. Naturally, the platform must be among those that support this functionality. Currently, though, this include the Dell Optiplex 7010, 9010, the MSI Pro with the DDR4 and 5 options, and also the NovaCustom laptops. Basically, we also provide here a link to the documentation which describe how the whole process goes. Next, we have also the Dasharo hardware compatibility list report, so the HCL report, which is the tool that collects information about the platform and firmware that is currently flashed on it. The report is compressed and stored in the DTS root file system, but users can also upload a copy to the Dasharo team servers to expand our knowledge base about the platforms that try to use Dasharo or are interested in using some open source firmware. The details that was collected during the report generation can be found inside that package in the file called results. And basically, both those functionalities will present in a minute during the demo. And also, naturally, the aforementioned functionalities use many tools, and we just strive to include the most up-to-date versions in each DTS release. Occasionally, we prepare patches, example for Flashland, to add some necessary functionalities. Installing them on DTS with our additional patches allow us to test them, to check if they work as they should, and then maybe use those changes to contribute to the appropriate projects. So like any changes we make in our tools, we want to contribute to upstream. So now it's time for demo. It has about 3 minutes. Let me. dumped package. Okay, and now we just want to restore our vendor BIOS. As I said, the report is dumped into the DTS root file system. So if we have that on our USB stick, we can just use option to do the rollback, and it should automatically detect if there is any package from where the DTS can take the BIOS to flash. And okay, that was the whole demo. Thank you. Okay, thanks. So 2 more slides. First about upcoming releases. So we have planned 2 upcoming releases. The first one will be the version 1.20, which will include several bug fixes that we have that we know exists, and a new menu option for updating the Dasharo firmware. That feature has already been added to the developer build, which is now available on iPixie, so over the network. So now we are ready just to fully release that feature. The next version is marked as 2.00 because we want to focus on updating the user interface. So for users, it will probably look quite different. And that's why we want to point that by just bumping the major number version. Additionally, we also plan to add a feature that enables testing the system on an emulated target. We want also think about the logo for DTS, maybe present a concept for like some dev builds that will be available for everyone that want to check some new features that we are working on right now. And yeah, and also like in the new feature where we also want to establish some clear release cycle just to better communicate upcoming changes to the community that uses DTS. And so roadmap. So lastly, I would like to just briefly introduce some functionalities, some plans that we have, and we want to introduce to DTS releases. So we think about some device authentication to improve the Dasharo firmware update process. So for that, we are considering providing a way to update the Dasharo firmware similar to the FW update method. We think that implementing some client authorization would increase the security of the update process itself. Next is expanding the DTS root file system via some NFS or maybe some another solution. Basically, the size of the root file system can just increase in time because we would just like to load new drivers or install some additional tools to perform some more complex operations. This can make loading DTS via iPixie a challenge due to its growing size. So to address that, we are exploring some ways to deliver additional kernel tools or modules to the system for users. Next is the DTS zero-touch initial deployment for firmware as is. So we recognize that installing some core boot, some open source firmware on various platforms can be overwhelming for users who are new to open source firmware. To assist with this, we believe that DTS could provide the appropriate tools for compiling and flashing the firmware in the state that it is right now without any requiring intervention from developers. So this may cause some new people to interest with the open source frameworks. And last, the TS security feature provisioning. We point out the estimated time for that for like next year. So we don't know when we will have time to work on that. But we think about how DTS could help in enabling some security features like Intel Boot Guard or maybe verified boot by implementing some additional options for the users to use their own keys to sign the firmware that they want to run. Okay. So
okay, we've got 5 questions to you. The first question is there a way to have it work entirely offline? So if DTS could be entirely offline.
Yes, we did not mention that, but in the documentation we also release the images that can be flashed on the USB device. So we point that in the documentation and describe that there. So you can just take the image, flash it on your USB, and use it entirely offline without booting from iPXE.
Okay, the second question is, how do you install Dasharo from Linux?
To flash it internally, we just use the flash room, and when we use the option in DTS to provide the initial deployment, basically this is what we do. But some platforms, for example, like Optiplex, need some additional steps to be executed while we installing Dasharo. So there may be some additional tools needed to do the full deployment. And yeah, I think that is like the answer to the question. So if you want to flash Dasharo from Linux, we for sure need flash ROM, and we might need some additional tools. And that's why we generate DTS to like provide all of that to our users.
Okay, next question. Is there anything stopping DTS from including current versions of Dasharo on the image itself?
We don't thought about this solution. So like the question is if we can just take all the Dasharo releases and put there. Yes, so someone could like take the system and have already the firmware provided inside the TS. I'm not sure. We just take the option to like download the firmware after we run DTS, and then run some verification steps like check the hashes and yeah, that's it.
Fourth question. Is the firmware binary cryptographically verified before being installed?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
Is the firmware binary cryptographically verified before being installed?
Let me see.
Do you use any type of GPG2 or something like?
Yeah, it was already.
It
was already answered.
Okay.
For now, we just only check the hashes, but the verification using GPG is something that we want to introduce in newest releases.
Okay, and we've got the last question. If DTS could use custom Dasharo images to be flashed on the device.
I mean, we provide set of tools inside DTS. So if only someone knew what he is doing, then I believe yes, he can use just the tools and take the Dasharo and just flash it by its own.
Okay, thank you, Tomek. Right now we've got 1 minute break, and then Michał will come with his presentation.
Hello and welcome to the Dasharo User Group event. My name is Michał Żygowski. I'm a firmware engineer. I will share some insights about the features that we would like to introduce into the incoming Dasharo firmware releases. So what I will be talking about exactly is the feature status of the following platforms: the Supermicro X11 SSH server platform, and for the desktop platforms, also the Dell Optiplex 7010, 9010, and Precision T1650, and of course the beloved MSI Z619 and Z719. Those pictures you already know from the Piotr's presentation. So it described the phases of every Dasharo release that each platform has to go through to reach a point where the public binary where the public binary is getting available for everybody to install and use. So I'll be focusing only on describing the things that are going to be included, and in this particular case, the X11 platform. So let's try to go through them quickly. So as Piotr already mentioned, we are already in the porting phase, and we already have some kind of working binary with our UEFI payload. And we have the server port installed in our laboratory, so we can like remotely flash it, debug it, thanks to the BMC module. And we have managed to integrate the Dasharo system features we use in our payload, so you will be able to see like the USB stack configuration, the network boot configuration, and many more that will be applicable for the platform. Of course, we are still dealing with some small issues because not everything is like working out of the box, despite the core boot port was complete, as somebody already noticed in the chat. So it occurs that the IKVM keyboard is not working inside the firmware, so it just starts accepting the keystrokes only in the operating system. So according to the community, it was neither possible to get it working with EDK2 and CBIOS, so it is like a non-issue. But thankfully, we have a serial over LAN working, and Debian 11 is happy with using and the serial over LAN and overall the display output from the IKVM application. What I've found most intimidating in the whole process is like the actual firmware flashing procedure, because when you have a server board with a PMC, there were like shit tons of ways which you can use to actually flash the button. There is the Supermicro update manager, the Supermicro IPMI tool. You can use FlashROM, you can use BMC GUI, but every damn method was not working except the BMC GUI, and still it was not working in every attempt. So we had some troubles putting up the documentation about how to try and flash the firmware, and after some long battles, we have finally reached some kind of reliable, let's say reliable procedure. But yeah, it's still far from ideal. So before we proceed to the validation, we still need to fix this IKVM keyboard, because I think this is like kind of critical issue for now to resolve, and then we will be able to smoothly switch to validating the firmware. But what's next for the next version we will like try to release? So for v0.2.0, some ideas came to my mind that core boot alone isn't really something that is usable. It just only serves as a good base for various, let's say, distributions where you can include CBIOS, EDK2 payload, or heads, or whatever else you want. So Dasharo chose to go to the UEFI path, similarly as the original firmware. But to reach some kind of feature pairing, I thought about including some additional drivers for the IPMI to have additional features for the out-of-band management, like some kind of SMBus ASF, BMC event logging, or maybe overriding some boot options, etc., etc. I have also been thinking about some OpenBMC import, because I have found some super micro open source packages which looked like a BMC project. So I will have to still analyze them to check whether they give something meaningful in terms of the OpenBMC port. If there are any, for example, binaries in there, or if this is just a pure source code. But it is certainly something valuable to work with. And I hope you will have also some better ideas what could a server board firmware include. So let's move to the desktops right now. So let's talk a little bit about the Dell machines. So with Dell Upliptex, we are quite advanced, and we were supposed to start the validation phase. And we have already a working binary for quite some time. We also have integrated some basic Dasharo system features with the Dasharo UEFI payload. And we also want to add some SMBIOS unique data migration to have like a complete deployment procedure. And yes, of course, in order to move to the release phase, we need to perform the testing of all the features and the binary that we'll produce. And yeah, you can also track the progress on GitHub. I have created the milestones with issues where you will be able to look for the progress. And for next releases, I don't have any particular ideas yet about what new features I could include, but most likely we can include other features that were developed for different platforms in the Dasharo family. Okay, and a quite new guest in our Dasharo family is the Dell Precision T6050. This machine actually has been especially chosen for some kind of network attached storage applications because of its ECC availability. So the board support is already in upstream Corwood for some time. It required very small modifications because it uses almost the same board as the Dell Optiplex. So we are just beginning the Dasharo adventure with this platform. So we still need the whole documentation, enabling of the Dasharo system features, the UEFI payload. We need to install the machine in the FrameDev laboratory to have some remote flashing and access to it, etc., etc. Also, the same as for the Optiplex, you may track the progress on the GitHub project, where I have created the V010 milestone. And yeah, look forward to it. As for the next releases for this platform, I was thinking about adding an runtime option to control what should be the default power state after a power failure. Because if you think about network attached storages, these machines should automatically power on themselves as soon as the power returns, because they're typically acting as a kind of servers or machines that expose some services that should be available all the time. So it seems like only natural to have this option and, for example, configure to always power on the machine whenever it's power fails, right? And yeah, the last but not least, okay, thank you. And last but not least, and the ones that you were probably longing for, the MSI desktop platforms. So I will not be recapping what already Piotr said about the current releases, so I will go straight to the plans for v1.1.2. And yeah, we are since we are we're quite far after the porting phase, so now we are constantly in validation and release phase whenever a new version is coming. So in the current validation phase for 1.1.2, we are developing the following features with the validation of those simultaneously. So quite some time ago, like in January or beginning of February, I have sent for review the Raptor like SCPU support, but I haven't managed to test it yet, actually. I have also recently added the MSI ASPI ACPI device that identifies MSI desktops on Windows platforms, and it causes to pop up those beautiful like MSI software installation utility, which will install the drivers for you, and where you can select the optional software and utilities that you want to have installed, so that you don't have to necessarily wait for Windows update to fetch everything. So this utility helps a lot when you are fresh installing your Windows on the MSI platform. And yeah, thanks to my dual DGPU setup that I showed in the blog post you have maybe possibly read, I have located the ACPI interrupt routing fix. Actually, an aggression I have introduced myself accidentally because I thought I was doing the right thing according to the Intel's BIOS writer's guides. But yeah, do not believe Intel papers blindly sometimes. And maybe that was also my mistake to choose the wrong interrupt numbers. But anyway, I have managed to locate the culprit, fix the interrupt routing, which actually unlocked the audio that was supposed to work on my NVIDIA GPU, because whenever I was keeping the v1.1.1 version of the MSI firmware, I couldn't get any audio on my monitor from the NVIDIA GPU. I was also recently quite into the fan control analysis of the original MSI firmware. I have spent quite a few weekends to actually get to know how it works and how it should be configured on the Super.io chip. And yeah, I think I'm on the finishing line, and we'll be putting up some code soon. So stay tuned for the updates on GitHub. And I think the most desired feature is the Flash BIOS button, which I started to prepare to implement too. I even have ordered this small guide, which I will introduce you in a second. Yeah, and besides that, I also plan to add an option to skip PS2 keyboard detection, because in order to fix one issue with the Ventoy very, very long delays in the boot, it occurred that the not connected keyboard caused those long delays, but then when you added the PS2 keyboard detection routines, it occurred that it doesn't work reliably for all types of keyboards out there in the world. So I think I will have to add an option to skip this detection routine and let the more problematic keyboards to still work. And also I have selected 3 more options that I would like to implement based on the, I think, most commonly mentioned stuff on Matrix, which is the platform power limits, the voltage control line, and of course the memory XMP profile selection. You can also track the progress on the GitHub milestone as for our projects. So regarding the FlashBus button, I'm sorry, before the FlashBus button, so v1.1.2 is supposed to be the supporters release. So this will be like available only for those who have bought the supporters insurance subscription. And a little bit later, we will also release the v1.2, which will be the community release available for everyone, which will contain all the features from the supporters release v1.1.2. And maybe possibly something else, but we don't know yet what it will be, if anything pops up. So we will see. And yeah, regarding the, thank you, the FlashBus button, I decided to go with the SpySpy project. This is an FPGA code that allows to sniff the SPI bus traffic, and this choice was inspired by a famous open source activist, programmer, photographer, and frequent hacker, Tramer Hudson. It's like his authorship of the project, and this is based on the Radeon ULX3S FPGA development board. And what is interesting actually about this SpySpy, that it has the time of check, time of use mode, which allows you to hijack the SPI cycles from the chipset and respond with data that is present actually on this small FPGA board SDRAM. And this SDRAM you can program with like any custom firmware binary you want, and then it just reads the SDRAM and uses this data from SDRAM to expose it to the chipset. And nobody said it will not hijack the SPA cycles coming from any third-party chips, like those responsible for the flash BIOS functionality. So the plan is to gather the traces of the flash BIOS recovery process and determine what vendor firmware structures are actually responsible for the binary validation that is done by this third-party chip, because currently you cannot use the Dasharo binary together with the flash BIOS feature. So there is something magic in those AMI BIOS firmware images that make them like work with this feature. So of course, the ultimate goal is to make this feature working with the next Dasharo releases, and hopefully I can make it. As for the MSI Z719, well, as you probably saw on the roadmap, it's quite late, because we have initially planned on quarter 4 or quarter 5 next year. But the more supporters we have, the possibly quicker we may deliver this port. So yeah, please support us and whatever the way you can. I believe already Piotr described all the support ways you can use, and yeah, let's make it work. And I have a few open questions from my side. Is MSI EasyLED debug support of any importance, like to regular users? And if there are any options that you also see as very, very important to me to be implemented in the near future, except those that I have already presented. And thank you. I'm now open for your questions. Okay. Sorry.
People are glad that we are working on BIOS flashback, and also XMP is here, and here is the conversation about Z690 and being the dead end because of Intel Gen 14 and socket 1700. And right now I cannot see any particular question to you.
Okay, so maybe a quick, a few words about the dead end. So basically, this situation will repeat every 1 and 2 years because Intel is like releasing each new generation or microarchitecture like almost every year. So new socket like is like introduced in like 1 or 2 years intervals. So what would you actually suggest to do in such situation? Would you be able to like pick up with the pace and develop everything from scratch every 2 years? That's obviously like not possible. And if you like always want to be on the bleeding edge, it's even more difficult for small companies like us. Mm-hmm.
What is wrong with PS2 init in Coreboot?
There is nothing wrong because we do not initialize PS2 in Coreboot. The problem is like in the EDK2, which doesn't take into account whether the PS2 keyboard is connected or not. It just blindly was blindly adding it as the input method, or the UEFI payload actually was, without any trying to detect if it is really present. Secondly, the PS2 controllers have no official way of detection, so it is not like the USB keyboards where you have like standardized enumeration process. For PS2, there is nothing like that. You can just try to hack, and you have to try to hack and use various methods you come up with, and yet not every method will work because each keyboard may behave slightly different.
Now we have 1 minute break, and then we have Piotr's presentation.
Okay, so hello to another presentation from us. Like it's about PC Engine's post end of life firmware updates and firmware support. This presentation contains a summary of the survey that we did. But for those of you that topic is new, let me give you some background. So we were maintainers of PC Engine's Switzerland company firewalls firmware for 6 years or something like that. We produced over 80 binaries for various flavors of this platform, of this hardware. Probably released like, I don't know, like 30,000 test case results or something like that. The releases were every month, but of course the COVID was not easy for PC engines, and also there is problem with continuing the same design, keeping the principle of PC engines of passively cooled, low power device with the modern CPUs and with the support of silicon vendors that PC engines can get. And because of that, PC Engines in September 2022 decided to discontinue sponsorship for open source firmware. And the question is if the question was if this is important for community to continue support for these devices, or maybe this doesn't make sense because the processor will be available maybe by the end of 2024, and after that it's already so old hardware that it should be replaced. The benefits of PC Engine's firewalls was the fact that the schematics was open. The firmware was open. Mostly there was AGISA blob, but it was not changed for a long time, and probably if there were any bugs, those would be discovered already. After the last release, which we made from our own dime, 4.19.01, which was released in February 2023, last month, we asked PC Engine's users, business users, people who have PC Engines for personal use, or maybe they doing one and the other, what's their interest in continuation of the support. And we suggested a subscription model, and this presentation tells about the results of this survey. First of all, I would like to thank all respondents for taking time and providing very, very valuable feedback. This was great exercise for 3M and we understand our market way, way better. And we definitely made some mistakes. For example, one question was, how many PC Engines APU platforms would you like to support with regular firmware updates? And some people understood this question as we asking how many from the PC Engines line, they have APU 1, APU 2. So some people say 4, 5, or all of them, or something like that. But some people understood this, that we exactly asking what we wanted to ask, is how many hardware device units you want to update, you want to get into this program, in this potential program. And so that was a small mistake. We get over 100 answers. People, except those who understood this question differently, reported over 600 PC Engines hardware units for update. And they said that most valuable features for them were ECC support, OpenBSD, FreeBSD, good support for those operating system. And then, of course, if FreeBSD, then OpenSense and pfSense can be supported well. They also mentioned core performance boost, which was definitely life-extending feature thanks to Michał. And TPM support is and was important for the users. Then a lot said that it's stable platform, it got good security, they have some trust to the open source firmware, to the core boot that we delivered. And some people also appreciated Debian and NetBSD support. In terms of how many releases people would like to have, and of course this is a little bit dreaming because number of releases depends on the resource available, and of course some, the most people said that they want 4 releases, which is released every 4 months. Some people said that they want 2 releases, 26%, and 1 release, 21%. The smaller numbers were 3 updates was 5.5%, 6 updates was 7.8%, and then minor 7-8 updates. But there was 3% people that wanted 12 updates, so update every month, as it was done so far. By the way, we did the updates every month because we want to stay close to the upstream code. In case of how PC Engine's user use the hardware, 66% use for personal use. Of course, this is a little bit problem of the survey and of the way we did the survey. We were not able to reach the business owners. We tried to do that, but apparently they didn't answer. Maybe they are happy with whatever is there. We will see where this will go, if they will contact us at some point. 7% were pure business users, and almost 26% was both personal and business use case. And we are very happy to get information from OpenBSD developers that they use PC engines for their infrastructure, for infrastructure protection. So that means a lot for us. That means that PC engines is stable hardware, and they can rely. We know OpenBSD as a high quality, very secure operating system with very good approach to security. Okay, about paid subscription, how many respondents were interested in paid subscriptions? You can see that there's almost half, a little bit over 50% respondents were interested in paid subscription, but there were a lot of comments regarding that, which I want to explain. First of all, the most common comment was like, I don't want monthly. Monthly subscription is not a good idea. Please do the yearly subscription. But then the difference in pricing, expected pricing, was like quite big. Some people said like, I'm okay paying 20 euro a year for the update for the device. For example, some users with bigger amount of devices, like 100 devices, they said that they cannot pay more than 1 or 2 euro per device per year, and that's of course would create some tiers, some support tiers. But let me go with the presentation to tell you more about that. Yeah, and those 52% who responded in the survey represented 66% of all devices reported in the survey. So we can see that most of the respondents were most of the devices would be included in the in this paid subscription plan. And what other suggestion we get? For example, very common suggestion was like, do not do subscription, please do donation-driven development or donation-based development. And okay, that's very interesting idea. We want to think about that, and we even have some decisions regarding that. Some said that we should sell, or we should offer a service which is on-demand custom firmware builds. And we will do that. We will add to 3mDev offer custom builds dedicated. Maybe business customers will be interested in that. Then some said that we should charge for each release, and we should just, like, my understanding of that was that we are doing some release, and if this release contains some interesting thing people want to buy, then they buying. And if not, they're not buying, they're skipping and just like ignoring that. So from our perspective, it is way more work, since we have to really carefully evaluate the market before we will do release. And of course, we have this survey, and we have some answers from community how to do that. But we will have to still trust those answers, that people which claim they will buy the firmware, they will really buy when it would be released. And whole investment and whole risk is shifted on us, and we are simply too small company to accommodate that right now. So I don't think this is something we would like to implement. Of course, ideal situation would be that we know that there is market demand, and that user want this firmware and with that feature set, and we clearly have that information. But in that case, why wouldn't we just get the payment upfront, or get the donation, or get the yearly subscription? Because this would be the same. If someone is really demanding that and want to buy that, then at least we would have less risk. Yeah. One of upgrades, I'm not sure what that meant, but I interpret that in a similar way as charging for each release. Some people gave very interesting suggestion that we should run technical assistance center so Technical Assistance Center, I believe it's attached to pfSense and is a paid support. And we already have that in a Dasharo support package. We use Jira Service Desk for handling tickets from our customers, and we are completely fine to open that kind of service for PC Engines customers if this will bring some resources for developing open source firmware. And then providing roadmap. So some people said, like, I can tell you how much I will invest in this if I will know the roadmap. So I plan to show the roadmap on a couple next slides. So what's the decision? So decision is that we, for now, not running any subscription model, not monthly, not yearly. We will base purely on donations. And we will give you a report on the next Dasharo user group, how good is it going. And what may change our decision, of course, if we will get business customers on board and they will tell us that we should change this or we should offer something more, then we can consider this change. Or if we will get critical mass from the users who want subscription model, then we also consider changing that. So what about feature request and what's the demand for features? So number one feature is UEFI support, so UEFI payload support. And yes, definitely we want to do that. We have some proof of concept which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. We have to fix that. I even found some weird bugs regarding RTC in EDK2 when doing port for PC Engines, but we have to wait if there will be enough donation to support that. Second most requested was security updates and bug fixes, critical vulnerabilities fixes. Of course, there is not much reports about core boot security problems and or firmware on PC Engines caused problems to operating systems and make them vulnerable. But who knows? Maybe this will happen, or maybe we'll discover something and that would need a fix. Then regular bug fixing. Then people demanded FWPD support, improved TPM support, Zen support. There are some Zen, old Zen bugs, but we didn't test the newer versions of Zen, so we don't know what's the status of that. Improved USB support, especially for internal ports. FreeBSD support is obvious because it's related to pfSense and OpenSense. Some people said about embedded updating tools or BIOS config tools from the operating system for remote firmware updates and remote firmware configuration. And yeah, so all those features could be on our roadmap. At this point, our roadmap looks as follows. In the next quarter, we plan to collect donations, and based on how this donation will come to us, we will look into scoping given features. So our hope is to have a release in Q3, which will in Q3 we plan to do the validation, which will cover FreeBSD 14, a new version of pfSense, Debian 11, Ubuntu LTS. Of course, we will have Dasharo toolsuit support if we want to have these features of that does configuration and updates. The plan is to have it on core boot for 20, but we will see. And for now, UEFI support is something planned. We don't know if we will have enough funds, but so for now we're planning that there will be just CBIOS, not UEFI enabled, because right now we don't know how many funds we will gather. And then of course, we starting another round of collecting donations, and 1.1 could be released. We will see if this will happen. How to donate? So some people suggested LiberaPay. So we created an account on LiberaPay. There is liberapay.com/Dasharo. You can go there. There is description that money going to PC Engines firmware. We evaluated this initial base release with updates to new operating system, with validation of new operating system as a 7,500 euro. And we will see if we can gather that. Then Open Collective also got the position to support us. If you go to opencollective.com/3mdep_com, there are two ways of contributing money: the regular way and the dedicated way for PC Engines release. And there is also plan for enabling cryptocurrencies donation on Open Collective, but that needs some additional work, and I hope we can announce that on Dasharo User Group, on the next Dasharo User Group. And then you can also donate cryptocurrencies through NLNet crypto wallets if you want to do that. The links is in our Dasharo documentation. So docs.dasharo.com, ways you can help us hash donate money. Then you can find Monero, Bitcoin, and PKT crypto. And there are also other ways to donate there, like PayPal, or you can just transfer money directly to our account. Yeah, and that's it.
We have no question from chat, so we can go to the last presentation, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, so let me find my screen. Okay, so closing remarks. Thank you very much for joining the first Dasharo User Group. I really hope you will give us feedback how we can make this this meeting better, what you want to see here, what you don't want to see here, what we did good and what we did wrong, and of course, like, we can talk about that during the following vPub. I have two more things for you. I'm very thrilled and very happy that that we were able to certify a first desktop computer in CubesOS. So our platform, which we call it, maybe not fortunate, but call it Dasharo Fidelis Guard Z690, is available. You can buy it in our shop. Buying it, you support us, and you're getting hardware which is CubesOS certified. And it will stay CubesOS certified because we will take care to even extend support for it through adding new features. Of course, if Marek and CubesOS team will recertify new firmware, we will extend security features. We also, if you don't know CubesOS Mini Summit, we're also working with CubesOS team to improve security of the firmware and to provide better features. So for now, for example, we did DMA protection enabling DMA protection at very early stage of the boot process. We disabling USB stack. We can disable network stack. So that helps mitigate potential risk from peripheral device, for example, or from USB device when you're booting. And this is powerful board. Everyone waited for that because there was lack of power efficient, maybe not power efficient, performance efficient hardware. Yeah, and if you need desktop, then think about it, and maybe you can buy this one. And second thing is we always hiring. We're looking for exceptional candidates which are passionate about open source firmware, about low level stuff. They like hacking. They want to understand BIOS better. They want to live in that world and create this ecosystem, change this ecosystem, and improve it. From our perspective, if you have any experience with coreboot, EDK2, U-boot, Linux kernel, you probably can send CV. Even if you don't have, but you want to learn, that's already a good situation. If you have experience with other open source projects and you can prove your contribution, this is also good, and we would welcome your CV. we deliver training programs. We send our employees for international open source conferences. We want our employees to thrive, to be recognized in the ecosystem. And please feel free to send CV to us. And if you think you are not ready for that because you don't know something and you are worried that you cannot meet the criteria, then please go to Open Security Training 2. This is Zino Kovach, non-profit organization which try to educate people on about various security stuff, including firmware courses which are delivered by 3M team. So thank you very much for attending Dasharo User Group. And if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, let's switch to vPub. During the vPub, we will have very interesting interviews with various peoples, and I hope we will have very freely discussion with beverage of your choice in your hand.
There is one question from Zirblazer on the chat.
Sure.
Perhaps I missed it because I'm running from computer to the kitchen, but was W618 mentioned? Like, I think the chipset, the port, or this chipset.
No, there is we didn't reveal that yet. So I guess the point here is about vPro mainboard, which supports modern chipsets and modern Intel CPUs. I guess right now we have already roadmap fully saturated right now. If we can speed up what we plan and we can deliver what we promised, like KGP or Talos, then I guess we can add it to the roadmap. But right now it's not yet on the roadmap. Any other questions? Okay, I guess there's one more minute. Okay. Yes, vPro and BMC, yeah.
So thank you for joining, and see you in a minute on vPub.
Yeah.